the first time we want to talk about strategy implementation or everything that can go wrong with strategy. To kick it off, Joanna was so kind and prepared like a short presentation to get us all going, and then everybody is invited to join in and discuss with us together and give in like your own personal spin. So thanks for joining us, and Joanna, please take us through your input.
Thank you, Steph, and welcome everybody. Greg, really turn on that ocean sound. It's absolutely fabulous. Anyway, we're just kind of like playing around with these formats, literally of getting together with people and chatting. So there's no agenda here, there's no sales pitch here, so no concerns about that. But the one thing that we're on the one hand focusing on, and on the other hand, where we see a lot of conversation that get like, a lot of engagement on LinkedIn and things like that, it's this like seeming, on the one hand, seeming disconnect between strategy and execution. As we know, and as we talked about, Stefan, the business dynamic is changing a lot, and things to need to kind of like move quickly. So everybody's in this kind of getting things down mode. And there seems to be some conversation. Why is there a disconnect between strategy and execution? Execution is most important. Execution eats strategy for breakfast. Then there's altering opinions that you need a strategy first, and all of these things. And these are things that we have been experiencing in our business with our own clients. And because this friction seems to be so strong and gets in the way of important things getting done and getting done well, is what we're actually being asked more and more by our clients to kind of help them through this. And I do have just like a 10-minute of some slides. It's not about theory, it's not necessarily about frameworks, but it's kind of sharing the problems that we've encountered over time and some of our approaches that we're playing around with to find solutions to help businesses really kind of get more out of what they're doing. So first of all, what do we mean? Like when we say strategy, there's a lot of definitions. For us, strategy is really a collection of choices and decisions and priorities. For us, well-crafted stories, whether in a brand pyramid with a great sound bite, that's not a strategy, that's a narrative of the things that you're focusing on, whether it's ESG, whether it's the culture that you want to build, whether it's your brand. But really for us are the strategies, the things that a company decides to focus on. And it's usually represented in some sort of visual like this, where you have some sort of what I like to call an unachievable purpose. We can talk about that at another time. I think companies are shooting themselves in the foot with doing crazy purposes, but it'll have some sort of purpose, some sort of mission statement. And then generally what you see, I think anybody in business will see some pillars, strategic pillars, which will stuff we will do. Innovation pillar, culture pillar, digital transformation pillar. We see this all the time. And they're kind of seen as these own things by themselves, and each will come with a set of KPIs that the leadership sets, maybe some frameworks like OKRs to work with. And then without a doubt, there's going to be quarterly check-ins where the CEO wants to see a one-pager of how are we doing. And generally what we've seen, Steph and myself, and Fabi and Sophie on our team, is that things don't get done as quickly and as well as people would like. So like, why is this happening? And in the meantime, there's a lot of opportunities being lost. So what we kind of call strategy is a series of decisions that are then followed up by coordinated activities. And what we mean by coordinated is that, a business has a lot of moving parts. You can't execute a very good, let's say, innovation strategy if you don't have the right technology infrastructure, if you don't have the right ways of working, if you don't apply it to the right business units, right? So it's a system of activities that are going on to get that strategy done. That's just a definition. So for us, strategy is really the best way that we see to kind of map it is through these, let's say, key activities. And it looks so, this is not a lesson, this is just what we mean by strategy. So it's like, if you take the big green circles here, this is a representation from IKEA. These would be, let's say, your strategic pillars. that are then connected to activities that the company does. And there's interconnectivity, interdependence, of course. So if you take something like IKEA, a core of their strategy is self-selection by customers. This then has huge impact of how they run their real estate business, the fact that of their geography, they need to make a lot of room for parking. It has a lot of implications on their supply chain, which means being always fully stocked up. It's not Shane. That's, you order it, then we sew you a skirt. They also, because of that, offer limited customer service. That's also a decision of what not to do. And that also has a lot of then kind of like a spillover effect to how much you invest in a call center or the fact that it's self-assembly and all of these types of things, right? So this is what we mean how a good strategy should be done. And that also implies execution. But what we've seen is that most strategies fail to deliver, and generally not because they're not good, but because companies fail to implement the good ones. So like the kind of patterns that we've seen of where this fails, right? So 99% of companies get this wrong at the risk of sounding like a LinkedIn post is generally there's pretty bad alignment. I have seen like just senior management will sit down, talk about focus. Everybody leaves the room. Everybody does their own thing. Bad communication, not miscommunication, but just bad, ineffective communication to the rest of the company, including the business unit leads, but every single person that's on the ground responsible for delivering good customer value. There's a lack of commitment and coordination between then different business units that have to interact with one another to get that whole thing done. And tactics, that's pushing stuff out the door, whether it's a new product, a new service, a new brand campaign, or whatever. Those are also not as, by default, those don't come out as well and as fast as they should. So these are the things through the problems that we've seen. This is kind of what we've defined as the critical, let's say, things that need to be established in order to have a great strategy that's flawlessly executed. And then I'm going to go through these one by one because they're so important that you have like no idea. So one is alignment. And why these four things don't happen as well as they should. It's not because people are stupid. It's because they're not good at their jobs. It's not because they're incompetent. I think that in my experience, they've just been based on certain assumptions. One is that, once we put down that one pager and you have the C-suite in the room and everybody's nodding their heads, there's an assumption that we're all going to be agreed. We've been in the room, we're all in, right? But the reality is, and this is according to an MIT study, 51% of senior executives actually, only 51% converge. It's a good number because it's more than 50, but actually it's pretty bad. And this study also found, for instance, that 49% of senior executives named 3 more strategic initiatives than the company actually had, right? In another kind of exercise that they did, senior executives found 3 less than the company had, right? So if you have 5 strategic pillars, 49% of your C-level team thinks that you have 8, and they're acting on those 8, you can see that it's a recipe for chaos, and it's literally a race for people with no sense of direction. What we kind of use this is probably the toughest one because you're sitting in a room with a lot of people that are very important and have a lot of opinions. But what we've seen are like some scary patterns around this problem. So if you're working as a consultant or working with senior teams, watch out for these red flags. One is like the illusion of unanimity, right? So everybody's sitting in the room, everybody's had their input, everybody's kind of nodding their heads quietly, and it seems that everybody is in agreement. But as the previous statistic showed, most of them actually are not. So then you can imagine what happens on the floor, let's say on the ground level when they're working with their teams. And another kind of like scary pattern is kind of passive aggressive agreement. So if you're sitting in a room filled with your senior staff and they're all just kind of like, yeah, fine, 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 and it's kind of quiet and they agree, you're probably not getting into any kind of alignment with the teams and an alignment that will have impact because they have to act on these decisions. And what we kind of see as a better way to do this is like really having this environment of controlled conflict. It's not a cage fight, but if people are not arguing, either on the one hand, if they're not questioning, if there's not a debate, that's not a good sign. If people are not immediately saying, "Oh my God, this is exciting. I already have 5 ideas in my head," this is also not a good sign. So having this kind of control conflict, and there's only like a nuclear solution to get this done. You lock people in the door and you fight it out until everybody really is in agreement and they know what to do on Monday. I think one of the industries that suffered most from this, and I think Greg could maybe echo some of my observations, is in the advertising industry. So as long as 20 years ago, everybody was talking about digital transformation. It was a huge, huge topic for all the holding companies. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? The world is changing. Everybody was kind of like in agreement on it. And then the creative directors went off and did their TV ads. The CFOs were saying, yeah, those are dirty pennies. We're not going to be like focusing on this at all. Some people were saying, oh, I can't wait until this social media trend is over. And then the future passed by them faster than a Japanese high-speed train. And the industry is where it is. If anybody is interested, there's a great case study about this, about Havas. So lock them in the room, cage fight, get into an aligned situation. Second one is communication. Once you have a strategy, you have to communicate it to everybody, not only your business unit heads and the heads of various functions, but also to the team in general, whether you're a 5,000 people company or a 20 people company. And there's another assumption that's kind of, I think this is just human nature. If we communicate something, we are heard and understood. I have been in so many corporations where you walk in and you see a video wall at headquarters, with the pillars of the strategy and posters on the walls and these wonderful things. Yet another study has found that 71% of employees actually cannot identify a corporate strategy. I have worked on strategy projects where I've hung around in a cafeteria in a building that houses 5,000 people. And I think about, like, if I said, what is your brand essence? I think I heard about 20 different opinions. And if you want to have a good communication actually for your company and your strategy, just announcing it is not a solution. You have to announce it, and these have to be done at the same time. You have to provide a reason why. Why are we doing this and not something else? Why is this important? How is this going to affect you? You have to also persuade people that this is the right way to go. I think that corporate communication should be taken out of the hands of corporate communication and companies and given over to marketing. They know how to sell stuff. You need to sell a strategy. You have to provide a reason to believe. So I'm the CEO and I'm telling people, guys, we're all lined up like this now. We need to be ready to go. What's my proof point? How do I prove it to people that it's important to me, that it's important to the company, and therefore it's important to everybody? And also just like a lesson from marketing and advertising, do it over and over again until they tell you to stop. When somebody says, stop telling me I get it, then you know your job is right. In advertising, we call this frequency. Don't stop. We're working on a bank project, and a very important strategic pillar for them was customer experience. So we set up a whole customer experience function, strategy, and so forth. And then we had to get the buy-in of everybody that was working in the company. And rather than putting posters in the elevators, we created several programs where we created the context for the board to be closer to the customer. 4 times a year, the CEO had to have lunch with his most angry customers. The entire board 4 times a year went to work at the call center and in the retail branches. After a period of 6 months, this escalated to 400 middle-level managers. By the time the board came to the first cross-functional meetings to solve customer experience issues, Everybody saw this. By the time we put posters in the elevators and a video wall with a really nice video at the entrance, they believed it because they saw it with their own eyes. So don't skimp on really good, effective communication. Finally, there's this thing about coordination, and this has really most to do with what actually not me, Porter calls the key activities, which is a really good way to define the strategy. Is that the company, like I said, is made up of moving parts. So if I'm doing something in ESG and it has to do, it's going to have a lot to do maybe with IKEA, like with the retail, with sourcing of the materials, with partners that you're going to be doing business with or you're not be doing business with on all levels of the company. And like I think like what you have to do is like then you go like literally you do this magical mystery tour and you go function by function. You say, okay, what are you guys going to do now that you believe us because we've done such a great job in communication? What is your contribution to the strategic vision of the company? And how can we help you? Is probably the second most critical question because most people don't know. They see a new poster in the elevator and they still don't know what they need to do differently between Monday and Friday, right? And once the business units kind of say, this is what we're going to do, we're going to roll out 5 new innovative products, we're going to have a way better customer experience. They also then have to coordinate with other teams to say, how does this affect you? And how does what you do affect what I do? So kind of the bad patterns that you see here is these business unit islands, right? So you have these strategic pillars and each one has their own like KPIs, OKRs, and deliverables and stuff like that, but they're not. If one thing is not working, the wheels throughout the machine are going to start moving either well or badly. You kind of can't expect siloed delivery expectations. And CEOs do call people in quarterly for a checkup, business unit by business unit, not value stream by value stream, which would be a much more effective way to do it. Or when you start doing something in your business unit, you kind of go, oh, we're going to need this other function to help us deliver our goals. So how can we work together? Or you see this business unit is doing that. Oh, it's not really compatible with what I'm doing. You need to have that sense of coordination. So you need to sit down with each business unit, map out the dependencies, set out overall goals, and see how those teams need to operate together to get things done. So it's really about value stream thinking, coordinating of key activities. I think the best thing that anybody can do is get rid of a pyramid and start doing those key activities mapping that I showed earlier. You have to sit down with your teams and ask them, do you have enough resources? Do you have the right capabilities? Do we need to buy you a tech company for all the things that you're going to want to do? Do we have to bring in new expertise? And then you have to really understand the interdependencies, operational, tangible, as well as in terms of principles. I remember like Fabi is here. Fabi and I were working on a telco, on a project which involved an innovation strategy, customer retention strategy, as well as an agile transformation part of it as well. So it's kind of like a loyalty program that was an in-app thing, and we started working on it, and it was amazing, and it was scoring great, and in every single sprint that we did, the next iteration got better and better and better. We were testing with customers. They were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. We love this brand," and then everything hit a brick wall. We wanted to test messaging to roll this out in social media. The brand people came over and said, you can't do this because we need a brief. And then the agency has to put together the Facebook post, and that will take 8 weeks. And if you know how Agile works, it doesn't work that way. Then the app team would be coming over and saying, no, you can't do this because we have a really weird relationship with our development partner. The story points that you get for development are really mysterious, and we're not going to let you roll this out next quarter. It has to wait another quarter. CRM was coming over to us saying, nope, 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 stop, 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 even though we talked to these people before. So it took a lot longer to get something really, really great out, and it was a lot more painful for everybody involved. And then once you're working on your tactics, it's kind of a given, right? So you've got to make time for people. So like only, most employees, 76%, find about 3 hours per week to work on strategic initiatives. You do the math, every employee gets 5 hours for lunch on a Monday through Friday work week. So it's not really cool that only 3 are devoted to working on strategic initiatives. And kind of the solution of that is also a bit of a no-brainer. Put up, agile teams, cross-functional teams, make the work that's coming out visible, focus on quick wins, and kind of maybe set new KPIs. And KPIs could be not just how much revenue something new can potentially generate, but especially if you're working on something new, a KPI could be something like how many pilots do you roll out per month, per quarter, per year? Um, how have you changed your ways of working? So how has the culture in your team changed? Um, how much do you actually spend and invest in collaborative work? And then maybe KPIs could be given to the CEO quarterly in terms of value streams. So here's the team that was responsible for bringing value to innovation initiatives, and they come from all over the place, right? Not business unit by business unit. So that kind of goes back to, we think that there's no silver bullet for this. Each one of these could have a million different frameworks. Every person will work with their client or with their teams differently in each of these areas, but we've identified these as like critical tick-off points that you kind of have to think about. Say, how am I going to get alignment? How can I make the most out of communication? How can I make sure that my teams are committed to a plan, have the right resources, and understand what other teams they have to work with? And then we have the tactics. This is not linear. This could be done simultaneously. It requires a continuous check-in. How are things working? Reevaluation of resources and things like that. So I've gone way over time because I talk a lot. And that's it. This is just something that we just kind of think that if you consciously just have those things in your head, it'll make that whole thing strategy execution. What is strategy anyway? How do we make sure that we actually get things done? And frankly, with not as much pain as there usually is in organizations to get things done. And I think we can all draw on that experience of how many uphill battles like everybody on this call has climbed to get anything accomplished in a good way. So that's it for me.
All right. Thank you a lot, China, for the input. And now the stage is open for everybody else. So what's your point of view on the topic that China just raised and the 4 different areas that she subscribed? Please join in.
I'll go first. We are dealing with humans, and there's the problem. People have invested in the current situation and they don't want to change. And therefore, they undermine our strategy, and we've all seen that. The passive aggressiveness is right, Joanna. They do that. And until management finds, or we find, some way to give them short-term rewards. Yes, you're doing it well. Wow, that was good. That's a good start. They are out on their own, and the non-believers will ridicule them, will annoy them, will call them corporate rats or whatever, and won't support them. So there, as humans we're dealing with, I don't have a short-term answer, except I was in London last week with my son, who works for Deloitte, and they have an unusual strategy when they have a difficult client. They say, we will do this with you. We will contribute all of our costs, all of our time with you, and we will share the rewards on an agreed basis. And that wins for them. It's a very, very risky approach, but that wins for them with a big client who is very worried about taking a stance. They're saying, we're in it with you. We're going to help you do it.
Okay, so shared incentives might help to move things forward. Any other inputs?
Yeah, I think that could be applied to team relationships as well, right? So let's say you could rethink. So yes, getting people to think differently is really hard. But maybe also performance could be done on, let's say, a value stream team basis rather than, say, business function or individual. That's another way to look at it. But I think also it's just hard work to get this stuff done. And like this thing of cascading strategy down and waiting for it to happen, it just doesn't work. I also find that it's really hard labor intensive work, but senior level people have to be down on the floor, you know, like this Toyota method, right? Like, what can I do to help? What kind of barriers can I remove? Um, Sometimes it's also a very nuclear option. You have to get rid of some bad people sometimes.
Just to mention one topic, like Greg already mentioned, is we have to deal with people, yeah. And I've in many different groups, big groups, and my experience was try to focus only on one strategy, try to build it in initiatives so that everybody is involved. Everybody has the same focus, but is focused, yeah. So my last client worked with 30 different initiatives and finally run out of budget and also out of focus because every business unit had their own initiative, and the strategy was so confused, nobody knew where to go. So it's better to have one single strategy, break it down perhaps into a few initiatives, focus the people there, explain, like Joanna mentioned it, communicate right, align all the people to this benefits of this strategy, and then you at least will deliver within a year a result. Yeah. Otherwise, you will end up with no result and have 30 initiatives done and no successful strategy is in place.
That's a really good point as well.
Stefan,
I think
you're on
Yes, yes.
mute.
I would like to add also something from my experience. I found out you addressed all the key issues why strategies can fail, and the strategy can fail in any of these issues, no matter how small or big it is. What I found in my experience that this, you call it alignment, I call it differently, but it's the same thing. It's agreement. This agreement, mutual agreement, is the key reason why people do not implement strategies. They do not understand each other. They think, as you say, that they think they work on the same issue, but they're totally different. Even their reporting system can be very different. You know, some people rely on one type of reports, the other people rely on different reports, and then at the end of the day, they haven't agreed what they're doing. And this is the key difference between the professional football club and kids on the grass. You know, in professional football club, everybody knows what he's doing. They have agreement who will do what things, and they have the common goal. On the other hand, people on the grass, you know, they run for the ball today here, next moment over there, and this is the key difference. And I would like to address this agreement or alignment as the key issue. What is actually the base for implementation of strategy?
I would agree with you. People talk about like all the problems that companies face. I also increasingly find that that is the critical one. Without that, everything else falls apart. The metaphor of the football clubs is really great. I totally agree with you.
Very good metaphor. Anybody else? Otherwise, we would be out of time. Any last statement? No. I think we are through. Okay.
So just between us before we close, we just maybe we're still recovering from COVID, but we miss talking to people about topics that we're passionate about, especially at a time where there's so many shiny objects. So we're starting with these kind of like clubhouses And we want to throw out different topics. We wanted to keep this one short just to share something that was a little bit close to our heart. But we want to keep it up. So don't feel bothered if we invite you again, maybe to talk about another topic and extend the session a little bit to really have a conversation.
Thank you very much.